Okay, recording in progress, I hear. So, hi everyone, I'm Kristīne. I'm the founder and sustainability advisor at Impact House. And today I'm here to share my insights, my experience, and the global trends that I've noticed in sustainable investing. As your business angels, this presentation is tailored for the investing side of things, but I will also share some of the best practices that I have seen in the startup world. I will share some insights from the research I have done myself, and I will share some key ideas for how to evaluate the sustainability of a startup, especially when you're dealing with early stage startups. So I hope you'll find this useful and relevant for where you are now. The goal of this conversation is to inspire you to explore this part of KPI setting for your investments. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me while we go through this. We don't have that many people today here, so let's just keep it casual and just address anything that you have on top of your mind as we go through this. So first, like a general mention of where I see we are in the state of sustainable finance. We are seeing a flow of regulation. It's like a waterfall coming from the top, dripping down to the bottom. And of course, it all starts with European Commission. Then it is directly impacting large financial organizations like banks, public funds, large investment funds, and then they are affecting and impacting how smaller VCs, accelerators, and also, of course, angel investors are thinking about sustainability. So as for European Commission, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the current regulations, but as of today, only large public-facing corporations are required to do non-financial reporting. Yes, so only large corporations are required to do non-financial reporting, which would be ESG reporting. This reporting usually covers three aspects: E, S, and G, which is environmental stuff, social stuff, and governance stuff. Under environmental, you would look at waste management, water consumption, and discharge treatment. You would look at recycling in the offices, and the company's carbon footprint by end of the, usually is one of the first things to actually look at. And as for the social stuff, you would look at what is the composition of the board? What is the gender composition also in the leadership of the team? You would also look at what other activities company does to support diversity and inclusion, to make sure that employees are treated fairly and well. Any kind of policies that are to support a fair and equal treatment of the workforce goes under here. And then there is the governance part, which for some VCs, at least from what I've seen in the region, is actually one of the most important ones. So as we discussed this, I wanted to share a practical example of my recent collaboration with a VC fund here in Baltics, Practical Capital. Probably you have heard of them. So they're also increasingly thinking about ESG and how to implement ESG metrics in their portfolio activities. And we collaborated on creating an ESG policy for them, and creating like a basically evaluation set of criteria so they can compare by specific metrics their portfolio companies and their investments and see how they improve over time. So this is not something that is happening in a very distant far regions. This is something that is happening already here in the Baltics. This is not future, this is today. But yeah, as for the regulations, the Corporate Social Reporting Directive, you can look it up. It's one of the key documents of EU taxonomy that's actually affecting corporate reporting regarding ESG, is currently not really that strict. So a lot of the things that companies are doing on European level is more as a preparation for the upcoming regulations, or they have some other business reason to do it. Sometimes is the demand from customers to do the right thing. Sometimes they see that it's a way how they can stand out in the recruitment competition, very relevant in Estonia, but of course in other places as well. And sometimes they see that they will get better investment terms or better financial deal if they start measuring and improving their ESG metrics. So yeah, but as for European Commission, this is where you can further look into on what is going on. And then as these new legislations, the Green Deal and the EU taxonomy, as they are being laid out and clarified by European Commission, of course, it is affecting banks and large VC funds already today. So for example, Atomico is one of the leading VC funds in the tech industry in Europe. I bet you know, but like just in case, they have recently hired their ESG manager. The first time ever they have a person who is responsible for ESG. And this is a huge step for European VC market, because as till today, there wasn't really much happening. There were some policies published on the websites. Some leading firms were already maybe doing this ESG evaluation and measurement, but it wasn't as noticeable as it is this year. And of course, we're seeing also local banks really stepping up their game. If you're talking with Swedbank or SEB or Luminor, all the big banks already now are starting to ask small to medium businesses, including tech companies, to start thinking about these things and at least try to start understanding what kind of metrics companies should measure and provide some first data on these things. Yeah, and then for like smaller VC funds and accelerators and angel investors, I hope you won't mind this silly GIF on the slides here, but there really is a bit of confusion, and there is a huge gap between understanding like what is ESG and then also understanding how impact investing works. So I wanted to just make a quick note on this. As for impact investment, there are investors who invest in companies who are aligned with sustainable development goals, and that is their core purpose of investment. They want to make a world a better place, and not just by making more money, but also by improving the water availability in water-stressed areas, or improving the diversity and inclusion, or some other like large social issues. And then there is the ESG part of it. ESG is a framework that is used in already existing businesses that are not directly, for whom the main business is not doing the right thing and doing like all the good stuff, but this is a framework to use what is their impact, to measure their impact, to measure how they improve over time, and through which companies can improve and change the way how they operate over time. Yeah, and of course, there's also a discussion of what exactly is sustainable. How do you define it? How do you measure it? And it is different across the board. So as there was this confusion, I was thinking that it makes sense to talk to more investors and ask them what do they think about the subject? Is sustainability important for VCs in Europe? So last year, I surveyed more than 200 European tech investors, VC funds, angels, accelerators, and I wanted to understand what is their state of mind and where they are going with this. So what we did, we surveyed more than 200 investors. There were mostly VC funds or accelerators. Yes, I don't think it's necessary to go in too much detail, but what you should note is that a lot of these investors were also from the Baltics, from the Nordics, and a lot of them were pan-European investors. So this is not something that is happening just in Western Europe or in the US or Nordics. This is something that is very close to home here as well. The insights came back quite disappointing. The main takeaway from this was that, sustainability is not a priority for tech investors. And that is really not a surprise, but I was hoping the stats will be better. But the interesting thing to take away from this is that sustainability is actually the number 5 criteria for making an investment. What investors are looking at is still the management team, the value proposition, scalability of the business, market size, all of the things we know that are the key metrics for the success of the business. But then the 5th criteria is actually alignment to sustainable development goals and the main business's impact on the planet. And I think this takeaway is something that is not really that exciting, but this is something that we should take away as also a suggestion to startups who are exploring this impact field. It is not enough to just do good. You also need to have a solid business plan, business case, value proposition. These things are still the first criteria, and only then we are talking about sustainability, because there's not going to be a sustainable business if there is not a business behind it. So that is the state of mind that we came to conclude here. Another interesting takeaway was that the primary reason or motivation for investors to actually invest in sustainable companies was the feeling of doing the right thing. It was a personal choice, and that was true for 74% of the people we surveyed. So this is an interesting takeaway, because sustainability is very much about measuring it, having the right KPIs and goals, but in reality, at the moment, there are not enough data. There is not enough processes in place to actually have solid foundation. So a lot of investors are actually going with the gut feeling, with the common sense, with like this wider perspective, and trying to navigate from that perspective. But of course, a lot of investors also mentioned other very good reasons why they choose to invest in sustainable companies. And that is, of course, that they see that there is increased ROI over time. They see reduced risk. It is easier for them to raise the next fund if they are investing in sustainable companies. And they also have more opportunities to access public funding. Another interesting takeaway that we got from this survey was that regardless of the first two things, investors still believe that sustainability increases company valuation. And that investors said like almost 70%. Yeah. And what else came from this was that investors expect investments in sustainable companies to grow. And that is no surprise. From the investors we surveyed, 80% believe that sustainability has to be an integral part of the business strategy for any company moving forward. So it is not really a matter of whether you should do something about the subject, but it's like when you're going to do it, and hopefully it's ASAP, because it really is increasing the value of the business, and the time to act around this is now. And also interesting takeaway from this was when we were asking investors about, like, okay, so how much of your investments in the upcoming years are going to go towards sustainable businesses? Like, where are your money where's your money going in the future? 37% of the investors said that they are aiming to make more than 90% of their investments in sustainable companies. So that's a huge chunk of finance in the tech industry that is going towards preferably sustainable companies. So yeah, a lot of interesting takeaways from this survey. If you want to see the full survey, it is available for free on my website. Feel free to go there, download it. I'll be happy if someone makes use of it, and if someone finds it useful. So yeah, as we are discussing about this, I thought it's really important to also mention what is happening in the tech companies at the moment. So my role as a sustainability advisor for tech companies is to help them understand where is the business opportunity in sustainability, to create a strategy with them, and to understand how high on the priority list sustainability should be. Because usually that is the biggest challenge for startup teams, because sustainability, especially at start, is something companies can just get lost in the woods discussing. Because for one person, dogs are very important. For another person, like social matters like diversity and inclusion is the #1 priority. And the third person saying, but we need to measure carbon footprint. And then in reality, they might not have enough resources. They maybe have one person working half of their time on this without proper training or experience. So it's not going as fast as necessary, and it's going in way too many directions. So I help them bring this clarity. So when I am working with companies and when I'm talking with companies in the tech industry, what I'm seeing is that the state of things in larger tech companies is already getting close to where they are at corporate level. But smaller startups, especially in the tech, are still getting away with not doing much or not doing anything, and saying that, oh, we're just building software, this doesn't really apply to us. And that might be true for some time. And once they will get bigger, they will definitely have these problems to deal with. So just wanted to go over a couple of examples of what larger tech companies are doing. So probably you all know Volt, especially during quarantine. We all have enjoyed the services of this amazing company. They are a food delivery company, but they're founded. The company is founded in Finland, and for them, the social part of their sustainability and responsibility is very important. So during COVID, they provided meals to the hospitals. Then they also ensured that the couriers are receiving fair and safe work environment, which is not always the case for these kind of jobs. And yeah, and they also, of course, have calculated their carbon footprint. And this is one of the good examples that I would suggest checking out if you're thinking about, like, so what's good in the industry. This one is a biased one. I used to work for Printful. My role was to develop their sustainability and responsibility strategy. And I know I'm no longer part of the team, but I'm still following and cheering for their successes and looking how their sustainability and responsibility is being developed. So for them as well, their core strategy is based on 3 pillars: people, planet, and product. So as for the product, of course, they're a manufacturing company. The production part of it is huge. So for them, it's really important to improve the production process and the quality of the product and the materials they use and the efficiency of it. So that's a very big part of it. But then, of course, there's also the social part. And for them, they are operating in the US market. So Black Lives Matter, diversity and inclusion, working with communities, empowering Black communities. This is something that really makes them stand out from the crowd. Yeah, so these are some of the things. And then Trafi is Lithuanian mobility startup. They are, I think, a little bit over 100 people team. So comparing to the previous examples, this is a smaller company, but they have hired their own sustainability manager. Very nice lady. I did an interview with her recently, which you can read on my blog. This sounds like a pro, but it's not, because in case you're interested in the subject, I'm just guiding you to where you can learn more. Of course, you can also go to their website and read about their sustainability there. That doesn't make any difference, but on my blog, you can see the backstory of how they got there. So they recently reached their carbon neutrality. And this was a process of, first of all, understanding why they need to do it. And for them, one of the core motivations was that they wanted to stand out from the crowd. They wanted to really show that tech companies also have a role to play in the journey to carbon neutral future. But it's not only about carbon neutrality for them. They also are volunteering their time to support local NGOs. For example, sometimes NGOs don't have the technical skills to like build websites or do some kind of technical stuff. So they volunteer their time to help the organizations locally. And for them, also the governance part is very important. So they launched their own code of conduct, and they're also working with local government to support the future of sustainable mobility, because that is basically their core business reason why they exist. Klarna is another example that probably you have heard of. This is a financial organization, startup. They provide loans, and arguably they're not the most the best company in the world, because they're providing quick loans if you want to buy cheap stuff online. So there is the kind of dilemma of how good the company is. But for these kind of companies, it's even more important to emphasize what is the benefit of them existing and what they can improve, how they improve and contribute to a better world. So part of their journey is to educate their customers on what are the best practices to personal finance management, so people don't end up spending way more than they can afford. But then, of course, they also focus on the planet health. They look at their own carbon footprint. They do various activities there, and diversity inclusion. As a global company, it's not really possible to skip on this topic anymore. And yeah, as I mentioned before, Atomico is a VC fund, one of the main ones in Europe. And I wanted to mention also here a VC fund, because this is probably to some extent also a relevant information to you. So they recently launched their head of ESG, and this is a huge step for them as a company and a fund, and something that really sets them apart from other funds in the region. All right, so maybe you have some questions or thoughts before I proceed. Going 1, 2. Okay, looks like not. That's all right. If you'll have some questions, feel free to ask them later. But as for now, I do have some trends that I would like to share with you, and that maybe can help you understand how much of a priority the subject is for you and the businesses that you have invested in. First and foremost, I think it's important to understand that sustainability is not about loving nature anymore. Maybe at some point it was, but in reality, it's not about tree hugger community. Yes, I do have some plants in the background because I love the aesthetics of it. But in reality, good business is good for the business. We now have more and more data that proves that strong ESG performance is related to good financial performance. So this is something that I hope you and your investment companies really can make use of as you proceed on this topic. And as already previously, we kind of touched upon this, like the attractiveness of impact investing is growing quite a lot. If you are reading BlackRock's CEO's annual letters, then probably you have also noticed that over the last year's couple, even more and more, we are seeing how he's emphasizing that sustainability is here for a stay. It is not a trend that is just going to pass. This is the way how to move forward towards prosperous future. And this year's letter, he actually shared his expectation that the next unicorns and the largest valued companies are going to be companies who are addressing climate issues, figuring out technologies and business models that hasn't existed before. And these are going to be the unicorns of tomorrow, not the enterprise software, not all of the things that we have seen so much of over the past years. This is something that is really worth looking into. Yeah, and I think this is also a very important thing to mention, that like we are still on the journey to get to a clear definition. If you would ask me now, like, what is the one framework? What is the one key definition? There still isn't one. For each industry, for each stage of the business, the journey is still different. There's not a strong regulation at the moment on what is greenwashing. If I would just publish on my website that every company who talks to me is going to become sustainable, probably no one's going to come after me. Of course, I'm not going to do it because it's just lies, because I cannot do it. I'm not a wizard, but it just shows that, like, yeah, for large organizations like banks and public facing companies, the risk is there. But unfortunately, on a small to medium size business level, the regulation is still not that strong. So here we come to the last part of my presentation, where I was thinking, like, what are the practical things that you could take away from this presentation. There's some music in the background. Dinah, is that you? Ah, okay. It was a good song, but like a little bit distracting. Thank you. Yeah. So as for the practical part, I was thinking, like, how you as an angel investor who doesn't have an ESG manager can understand and evaluate the sustainability of company and whether it makes sense to invest in it. So I wanted to keep it short. So here are 3 things or checklist for you to consider implementing in your decision-making process. The first and most obvious one is understanding what sustainable development goals are. I hope that you are all familiar with them. And one of the main criteria here is to understand if the business is aligned with them, or is it working in completely against, like in completely different direction. That is probably one of the most important criteria here. If you have found a business as your potential investment who can make money by doing something that supports sustainable development goals, you've come across something that really has the potential to bring you the ROI. Then the second and the third are kind of related. Another framework that I would suggest you familiarize yourself with is PRI.org organization. They have published responsible investing principles, and they basically are guidelines for VC funds and larger firms, but this is something that you can also use to clarify what are the KPIs or metrics that you should consider. What I would advise is that you should have some kind of list of KPIs for you when you are talking to a new company. Probably you already now have some kind of a checklist of what are the things that you are looking for. So is that the right industry? Is the team okay? or great? I hope you're looking for great teams, not just okay teams. And then maybe some other metrics, like is the team diverse is the founding team diverse? Do they solve any of the sustainable development goals? Do they have any strategic vision for sustainability? Maybe they don't have everything figured out, because as an angel investor, you're probably working with very early stage companies. Of course, they don't have like an ESG report to present to you, but to ask them to provide you with like a strategic vision on sustainability would already be a very big step. Because if investors are not going to ask them this, then probably they won't have a good motivation. And then once they grow and they have to fundraise the next round, they will come to me and I'll have a new client. And they'll have to rush things. They'll have to work against deadlines. They'll already see the end of the runway, and it's just unnecessary stress. These are the things that sustainability is a hygiene factor. If it's not there, it's visible, it's smellable, it's just not looking good. So highly suggest you try to incorporate this as soon as possible. So yeah, just to wrap it up, like I strongly believe that sustainable business might just mean staying in the business and succeeding in the business. Do you have any questions or comments on what we discussed?
Well, I have a question about maybe companies you suggest we should look at or follow, where there's, successfully either, well, it would be a good case if they changed, like they were not having before sustainable focus, and then they changed to it. And then maybe a company which, like in its core anyways, based on having the sustainable impact in, various aspects of their business operations.
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
No. Do you have companies that you suggest that we should, look at or follow as an example? For like one example could be a company that didn't have any sustainable goals implemented in it, because it's like very, old school company, being around like, let's say 15 years, right? And then like a new company where basically it's built on the philosophy of that they're following their logistic chain, they're following that their employees are being equally paid, no matter their age, gender, or nationality, you know, like this, so that we could understand how we can relate to these companies.
If you want to look at like the very best example, then of course you have to look at Patagonia. This is not a new example, but they really stand out from the crowd. But then if you want to look at companies who are transforming themselves to become sustainable, these are all the examples that I mentioned. As well, you can look at all the gas companies, like look at Circle K or Virši, how they are presenting their achievements, like what they are doing at like their core business model is to sell carbon. That's the business that they're currently are in. And at the same time, they understand that the regulations are changing and that this business model is not going to be possible for much longer. So they are working working hard to reinvent themselves and optimize what they can and look for other business models as soon as possible to stay in the business. Maybe some other questions? If you have any questions in the future, you now know me. You have looked at my face for 40+ minutes, which I thank you for the attention. But I am open to, yeah.
Kristīne, what services does your company offer?
So I work with tech companies on creating their strategy and implementation, communication, all things sustainability. But yeah, basically anything sustainability related, you can ask me and maybe I can help. Okay. It's yeah.
Just sustainability, as you rightly pointed out, is a very undefined term and is getting worse and worse, I would have to say. ESG at least focuses itself on 3 specific directions.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, for the long-term world, survival E is number 1, because if we don't fix that, then the rest actually doesn't matter. So, but that, just as a side note, investing in energy or environmental issues has been a terrible investment for venture capital overall, except for maybe the past 3 to 5 years, maybe, and that still has to be seen if it works out, because it's not a good. It requires a lot of basic science. It's extremely capital intensive. It doesn't scale well like, let's say, software does. Mm-hmm. So it's we can't expect that angel investors will be investing much in startups that fit, let's say, within the E category, making a big change in that. Hopefully that will change, but in general, venture capital has done very, very poorly in investing in energy and environmental issues.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. Yeah. And that's an interesting insight, because now sustainability is this trending topic and we're seeing that everyone is becoming sustainable. But when you look at the historical data, of course, it hasn't always been the case, then that sustainability has been an interesting subject. Yeah. And I think another thing that I wanted to mention here is that for tech companies, it's actually very often the case that they by default are working on solutions that are improving efficiency of some kind of processes. especially in the manufacturing industry or on mobility. And then by the extension of that, they're also saving the resources. And then sometimes they are already working on something that is related to supporting sustainable development goals, but they are just missing the social or the governance part of it, or they're missing the understanding of what actually the market is currently looking for. They are selling their solution as an efficiency improvement, but if they would try to approach their customer corporation as selling a solution that helps improve the sustainability metrics, then maybe it would be a different conversation nowadays. So these are the kind of business opportunities that I am working with startups to also identify and understand. And it's not just about rewriting the content of the website, it's about actually going in the organization and understanding what else is missing, what else needs to be there for it to actually be a solution.
So for Latvian startups, I would agree that if they would be wiser in presenting themselves, how they do move forward, especially the environmental goals, then that could open up them to earlier investments by larger Western VC companies, because they are looking for such investments. So it's a matter of presentation. But as you said, it just can't be all presentation. It has to be actual fact. But so yeah, that's something that I think would help them by stressing this, because then it fits a category that some VC funds could be looking into. Not angels as much, but VC funds.
Kristīne, it looks to me that there are no more questions, and that's okay. Like,
well, I'm just giving the free space.
Yeah.
No, I mean, thank you for coming today. And it was my initiative for everybody to know that I wanted to see Kristīne here, because I thought we need to talk about it, and we don't need to wait until somebody else is going to do it. Obviously, VC funds have more impact on making a change here, but it has to, where it's going to be demand is going to be, it's going to be for the supply, right? So if we're not going to demand this from the startups, if we're not going to, as citizens, demand it, from the big companies, so how are you going to have these solutions? So it's a chain reaction. So I think popularizing these kind of ideas is the way to go. And then until we're going to get to the result, it's going to take some time, but we're going to start talking and thinking about it now, and actually empowering businesses already now. I've consulted some startups who are very focused on the green economy and recycling and things like that. And usually they're very passionate about implementing an idea like that, but they don't know anything about the business, how it's working. And then they have the difficulty of, even if they do know how the business is working, because there's like accelerators you can go through, then there's like these legal legislations where it's kind of difficult. So you have this like waste, and you need to transform it in another reusable material, right? Like whatever, it could be carpets, let's say. But then to collect it, to actually, you need water to wash it, and energy, to make it again into something usable. And then you need to like distribute, you need to sell it, you need to convince people. And then you understand it's the same hustle as making a product in general, from zero, some house appliances, whatever, you need something for the garden. So anything of that could actually be secondhand made, like anything that you have in your garden, basically. Why it should be, the pottery, why it should be, the best, unique unused material before. It could be, recycled. It would save so much waste, but yeah, it just takes a lot of time until people can get there, until the legislation helps it to be more supportive, and then actually make the change that we need.
Yeah, I think circular economy is the future, and I'm seeing more and more examples of how that is actually happening in real life. For example, a chain of coffee shop is donating the wood things that you use to stir the coffee, and they are sending it to a facility that is cleaning them, sticking them all together, and it becomes like this thick, almost like veneers material, because it's like a plywood, yes, plywood basically, but from the coffee sticks. And people are just so excited about the idea that they are buying chairs from it for crazy amounts of money. But this is, of course, very much fueled by hype at the moment. And that is a good thing because the hype is needed, but at the same time, it has to be like viable also in the long term. All right.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I very much appreciate it. And yeah, I'm here, and you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or over email. I'll be happy if I can help you or your portfolio companies.
Paldies.
Paldies jums.
Jā.
All right.